How's everybody doing today? Happy Sabbath. Hope everybody is enjoying a lovely change in the weather. I know I am. It's awfully nice to be able to go outside and spend time and not have to wear a jacket at all. I mean, it's been like, 8 months since we've been able to do that? Feels like it. I don't like the hot, but I love this weather. 75 degrees, 65 degrees, right in there. So I'm continuing the Voice of the Prophet series from that Monaco started. So this week we are talking about Zachariah. If you guys want to turn there, we're going to stay in Zachariah the entire time, so you don't have to be flipping back and forth. Zachariah is kind of an interesting book. I view it as one of those pictures that's made up of a lot of different little pictures. Have you guys seen those? Where they'll have like a picture of a guy snowboarding and a picture of a guy skiing and a picture of a guy doing this and that, and then they'll have like a bunch of different scenery pictures and family pictures and everything, and then all of a sudden you take a step back and you look at the big picture, and it gives you like the face of Jesus. Well, that's kind of what I see with Zachariah, is you've got these little snapshots, and each one fits into the big picture of Zachariah in a different way, adding different elements, different colors to the picture, if you will. So Zechariah, it's a book that was written around the same time as Haggai. It says in verse 1 that it was written in the 8th month of the 2nd year of Darius, and Haggai was written in the 6th month. So they started writing their books about 2 months apart, and they're both talking about the rebuilding of the Temple of Jerusalem and Jerusalem itself, where Zechariah is concerned. So it's believed that Zechariah was one of the people that went with Haggai and Zerubbabel to Jerusalem to rebuild it, and a lot of what he wrote is prophecies about what's going to happen to Jerusalem. It's kind of a back and forth sort of a book. It talks about Jerusalem being rebuilt, and talks about Jerusalem being destroyed, and it talks about Jerusalem having children and old men and women playing in the streets and having no fear, and then it talks about the Jerusalem being attacked by all the nations of the world. So it kind of follows that with history and future, and the shepherds versus the one true shepherd, and it's kind of got this sort of back and forth comparison feeling to it. So, but the most important thing that I get out of Zechariah is that it prophesies about Jesus. There's several prophecies in here that we look at, and we can see how Christ fulfilled them whenever he came. In chapter 3, we read about Joshua the high priest. And it says, "And he showed me Joshua the high priest standing before the angel of the Lord, and Satan standing at his right hand to resist him. And the Lord said unto Satan, The Lord rebuke thee, O Satan. Even the Lord that hath chosen Jerusalem rebuke thee. Is not this a brand plucked out of the fire? Now Joshua was clothed with filthy garments, and stood before the angel. And he answered and spake unto those that stood before him, saying, Take away the filthy garments from him. And unto him he said, Behold, I have caused thine iniquity to pass from thee, and I will clothe thee with change of raiment. And I said, let them set a fair mitre upon his head. So they set a fair mitre upon his head, and clothed him with garments. And the angel of the Lord stood by. And the angel of the Lord protested unto Joshua, saying, thus saith the Lord of hosts, if thou wilt walk in my ways, and if thou wilt keep my charge, then thou shalt also judge my house, and shalt also keep my courts, and I will give thee places to walk among these that stand by. Hear, O Joshua, the high priest, thou and thy fellows that sit before thee, for they are men wondered at. For behold, I will bring forth my servant the branch. And behold, the stone that I have laid before Joshua, upon one stone shall be 7 eyes. Behold, I will engrave the graving thereof, saith the Lord of hosts, and I will remove the iniquity of that land in one day. And that day, saith the Lord of hosts, shall ye call every man his neighbor under the vine and under the fig tree. So we know that the branch is a reference to Christ. Whenever it talks about the vine, we're grafted in with the Jews to the one true vine, the true branch that is Christ. And then we are labeled branches. And here it talks about the death of Christ, and it says that I will remove the iniquity of that land in one day. In that day, saith the Lord of hosts, shall you call every man his neighbor under the vine and under the fig tree. And continuing that same idea that of Christ being foretold in Zachariah, in chapter 9, verse 9, it says, rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, thy king cometh unto thee. He is just and having salvation, lowly and riding upon an ass and upon the colt, the foal of an ass. And we know that whenever he came to Jerusalem, what was he riding on? He was riding on a, yes, thank you, Daniel. He was riding on a young donkey, right? And so there it's foretold. And throughout all of the prophets, we have little snippets of Christ and the prophecies of Christ. And it's incredible, the number. It was described to me as if you put a bunch of silver dollars in Texas and put them 4 inches deep, and then you threw a silver dollar and you went and you looked for that one silver dollar, the chance that you would pick up that silver dollar the first time is the chance that Christ would have fulfilled all the prophecies. It's that huge of a improbability. And taking another snapshot of Christ here in Zechariah, let's turn to chapter 12. And starting in verse 9. And it shall come to pass in that day that I will seek to destroy all the nations that come against Israel, and I will pour upon the house of David and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and all supplications, and they shall look upon me whom they have pierced, and they shall mourn for him as one mourneth for his only son, and shall be in bitterness for him as one that is in bitterness for his firstborn. In that day shall there be a great mourning in Jerusalem, as the mourning of Hadad Rimmon in the valley of Megiddon. And the land shall mourn every family apart, the family of the house of David apart, and their wives apart, the family of the house of Nathan apart, and their wives apart, the family of the house of Levi apart, and their wives apart, the family of Shimei apart, and their wives apart, and all the families that remain, every family apart, and their wives apart. And then chapter 13, likewise, is prophesying of Christ. And I guess it's a short chapter, so I guess we can read that one too. In that day there shall be a fountain open to the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem for sin and uncleanness. And it shall come to pass in that day, saith the Lord of hosts, that I will cut off the names of the idols out of the land, and they shall no more be remembered. And also I will cause the prophets and the unclean spirit to pass out of the land. And it shall come to pass that when any shall yet prophesy, then his father and his mother that begat him shall say unto him, Thou shalt not live, for thou speakest lies in the name of the Lord. And his father and his mother that begat him shall thrust him through when he prophesieth. And it shall come to pass in that day that the prophets shall be ashamed, every one of his vision, when he hath prophesied. Neither shall they wear a rough garment to deceive. For he shall say, I am no prophet, I am a husbandman. For man taught me to keep cattle from my youth. And one shall say unto him, What are these wounds in thy hands? And he shall answer, Those with which I was wounded in the house of my friends. Awake, O sword, against my shepherd, and against the man that is my fellow, saith the Lord of hosts. Smite the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered, and I will turn mine hand upon the little ones. And it shall come to pass that in all the land, saith the Lord, 2 parts therein shall be cut off and die, but the third shall be left therein. And I will bring the third part through the fire, and will refine them as silver is refined, and will try them as gold is tried. And they shall call on my name, and I will hear them. I will say, It is my people, and they shall say, The Lord is my God. So here we have Christ again being prophesied. It talks about the wounds in the hands of the shepherd, and that he was killed by his own and that he was killed it says in verse 7, Awake, O sword, against my shepherd, and against the man that is my fellow, saith the Lord of hosts. Smite the shepherd, and the sheep shall be scattered, and I will turn my hand upon the little ones. So who is the true shepherd? Jesus is the true shepherd. And in Zachariah, it compares the true shepherd to the shepherds that had been leading the sheep. It talks about how the people that were supposed to be leading them were not leading them the right way. They were leading them astray, and they were taking advantage of them. And it says that he will strike them for leading his sheep astray. So you can see that there are several different passages in here that prophesy of Christ. One of the other major prophecies that are in Zechariah are about Jerusalem. So we see in chapter 14 it talks about the nations coming against Jerusalem, and the Lord coming as king and overtaking all the nations that come against Jerusalem and saving them. And in verse 16 it kind of starts summing it up, and it says, And it shall come to pass that everyone that is left of all the nations which came against Jerusalem shall even go up from year to year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. And it shall be that whoso will not come up of all the families of the earth unto Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, even upon them shall be no rain. And if the family of Egypt go not up, and come not that have no rain, There shall be a plague, wherewith the Lord will smite the heathen that come not up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. This shall be the punishment of Egypt, and the punishment of all the nations that come not up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. In that day shall there be upon the bells of the horses holiness unto the Lord, and the pots in the Lord's house shall be like the bowls before the altar. Yea, every pot in Jerusalem and in Judah shall be holiness unto the Lord of hosts, and all that sacrifice shall come and take of them, and seed therein. And in that day there shall be no more the Canaanite in the house of the Lord of hosts. So there again we see the peace of Jerusalem, the promise of peace, and a freedom from fear, which is another underlying theme in the book of Zachariah, is that there will be no more fear in Jerusalem. In Zechariah 8, 1 through 5, it says, Again the word of the Lord of hosts came to me, saying, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, I was jealous for Zion with great jealousy, and I was jealous for her with great fury. Thus saith the Lord, I am returned unto Zion, and will dwell in the midst of Jerusalem, and Jerusalem shall be called a city of truth, and the mountain of the Lord of hosts, the holy mountain. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, there shall yet old men and old women dwell in the streets of Jerusalem, and every man with his staff in his hand for very age. And the streets of the city shall be full of boys and girls playing in the streets thereof. And if you turn to verse 14 of chapter 8, it says, For thus saith the Lord of hosts, As I thought to punish you when your fathers provoked me to wrath, saith the Lord of hosts, I repented not. So again have I thought in these days to do well unto Jerusalem and to the house of Judah. Fear ye not. So he's giving promises to these people that Jerusalem will yet again be a place where they can play and they can walk the streets without fear. And this is something that I believe the Israelites at this time really needed. Whenever they were rebuilding Jerusalem, they were having to build with one hand and defend themselves with the other. And they were taken out into captivity by the Medes and the Persians and by the Babylonians. And this was a promise that they again would be able to inhabit Jerusalem, that they would have their own city. And another part of Zechariah, I didn't write the verse down, but it just came to me. It talks about the abundance of Jerusalem. That Jerusalem was going to have so many people that the wall could no longer contain them. That they would flow out around the wall, but it wouldn't matter because the Lord was protecting them and they would have no fear. But there is a caveat for them. There was a condition. And it says in verse 16, These are the things that ye shall do. Speak ye every man the truth to his neighbor, execute the judgment of truth and peace in your gates, and let none of you imagine evil in your hearts against his neighbor, and love no false oath. For all these are things that I hate, saith the Lord. So he promises them peace and prosperity. But he also says you need to be truthful to your neighbor and to exercise peace, and to think no evil toward one another. Now that last one, I think that last one's the hardest. Honestly, whenever somebody does something that hurts us, what is our immediate reaction? We think bad things about them, right? They may not have done it on purpose. They may have just done it accidentally. But our immediate reaction is to react to pain with anger or evil thoughts toward that person. But the Bible says to turn the other cheek, to love those that persecute you. And that's what he's telling them here. I believe that this one verse is probably one of the things that we can take and apply to our lives most readily today. To have truth, to tell the truth, and to think good thoughts about one another, to wish good on one another. And Christ said, in summing up the Bible, all the law and the prophets can be summed up in what? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and love your neighbor as yourself. So, I hope that you will exercise to do that. It's a mental workout. I know it's not easy. We got to train ourselves to do that, but with a little bit of exercise, I think that we can do it. So that's my challenge to you guys as you go about your week, to do a little mental exercising and thinking good things for the people around you. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Craig, and we need to always keep our focus on Jesus Christ and the gift that he has for us, eternal life. So let's turn in hymn number 242. We're going to sing Satisfied, hymn number 242. All my life long I had panted for a drought from some cool spring that I hoped would quench the burning of the thirst I felt within. Hallelujah, I have found him whom my soul so long has craved. Jesus satisfied my longing. Through his blood I now am saved. Feeding on the husk around me till my strength was almost gone. Longed my soul for something better, only still to hunker on. Hallelujah, I have found him whom my soul so long has craved. Jesus satisfied my longing, through his blood I now am saved. For I was and sought for riches, something that would satisfy. But the dust I gathered round me only mocked my soul's sad cry. Hallelujah, I have found him whom my soul so long has craved. Jesus satisfied my longing, through his blood I now have saved. Well of water ever springing, bread of life so rich and free, untold wealth that never faileth, my Redeemer is to me. Hallelujah, I have found him, whom my soul so long has craved. Jesus satisfied my longing, through his blood I now have saved.